Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs Mental Health here on YouTube. Hey, this one is with Ashley Turner, and she is the founder of Laugh Now, Cry Later, and it helps people on the streets. And then, well, we'll let her talk about it. But Ashley lost her brother to an overdose a couple of years ago, and the thing was, he was in the hospital about 2 hours before that. So we talk about the problems with the system, we talk about her foundation, we talk about her brother, all wonderful things. So without further ado, I give you Ashley Turner.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you for the condolences as well. As you know, losing someone or anyone, really close to you is hard and it's complex and there are no words for it. And the one thing I can say throughout my advocacy is I've heard a lot of condolences from people of power and authority, specifically government, and the Saskatchewan Health Authority. With me, though, from them, I didn't want condolences. I wanted change. So for them, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of sent back their condolences. And as much as it was appreciated, condolences doesn't implement change and it doesn't prevent deaths. And condolences, they don't make differences. They don't assure that it's not going to happen to somebody else that goes into the system and gets turned away from the hospital. And that's one thing I made clear and I emphasized is that, condolences aren't going to change the drug addiction crisis. So I
Yeah.
definitely made that really known throughout my advocacy is that I want change. And, we, through advocacy and with Mom Stop the Harm, we definitely promoted that change and we got that change, which is saving lives currently. So that's all that matters for me is that I wanted to make sure that what happened to my brother never happened to anybody else again. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about your brother and his story, and kind of what happened and how it happened and why you decided to advocate, especially to the government.
Um, when I first heard that my brother passed away, my mom had called me. Um, and I know I have two brothers that were in active addiction. One is still in active addiction currently. He was in active addiction a lot longer than my brother who passed away, and he's still currently in active addiction. But when you get that phone call, you never expect that it's going to happen to you until it does. And yeah, my mom had told me that my brother, had passed away, and I literally felt my soul leaving my body within that moment. It's definitely the hardest words I've ever had to hear in my whole life, and I'm 29 years old, so a lot of years, to to take something like that was definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. But when I heard that my brother passed away, my mom had told me what from. I just had thought that he, passed away on the streets or, he had passed away at someone's house or at Salvation Army or in a back alley somewhere. You never think that I never knew all the details adding up to it until, we started getting patient advocate reports and Mom Stop the Harm had contacted us in regards to what had happened to my brother. So we found out that my brother overdosed in White City on November 7th in the evening at 7 p.m. Um, he was taken to Regina General Hospital and they had to obviously pump his stomach and put a tube down his throat. Um, in the morning at 5 a.m. on November 8th, he became coherent, not sober, coherent. And those are two very different things, which I've learned over the years is that he was not sober. When he woke up, he was just coherent. And that was at 5:15 in the morning. He had spit the tube out. The first thing he requested was detox. In that moment of him awakening, he had asked the emergency doctor on call, for detox. So that's one time in the patient advocate report. Another nurse came in. He asked again for social detox. That's two times now. And between 5 a.m. and 9:15 a.m., which is when he was discharged, that's a 4 hour period, he asked for detox seven times.
Mm.
He asked detox from addictions counselors, multiple nurses, and multiple doctors 7 times. And I emphasize on the seven because he should have only had to ask for it for one time. And, they teach, when my brother was in rehabs and detox, they teach you your tools. And one of your tools is to seek help. When you feel like you need it and you want it, seek that help. And he was told that he didn't meet criteria for social detox. He was told that there were no beds available for social detox. So they, at 9:15 a.m., they discharged him after they got the clear from poison control that he was good enough to be let back out in the community. He got a brochure for a cab voucher. He got a brochure for social assistance, which is something he never asked for. He never asked for financial assistance. He needed medical health care, not financial assistance. But he had two of those brochures, and no Noxolone kit provided to him, been implemented, and it was implemented 5 years ago that anyone who leaves the hospital after suffering from an overdose should be provided it. He didn't get that kit. My brother was discharged at 9:15 a.m. on November 8th from the Regina General Hospital, and he died in the evening of November 8th in White City from a second overdose. So within a 12-hour period of leaving the hospital and being discharged, he passed away. So his
I'm
death,
so sorry.
I advocate. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. His death was preventable. In that day, it was preventable. Later on, we discovered that no referral was made to social detox on behalf of my brother. There was no call. There was no electronic referral. We had found out when we had contacted detox that if they would have admitted my brother that morning, just kept him for a few more hours, like he asked to be, because he did ask to be medically admitted for withdrawal. If they would have kept him, a bed available would have been ready for him within the afternoon of November 8th. So there's so many balls dropped that day with my brother. So many gaps in the system were dropped that day. If one person would have just listened, out of all the people that took a second to hear him, he wouldn't have died that day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a flawed part of our system, is that they say that if you ask for help, it's there and it's readily available for people, but it's not.
Right.
It's not there when they want it. It's not there when they ask for it. I can imagine now in terms of stigma, when I think of it, when I just wonder how my brother felt leaving the hospital. In the patient report, they said he was polite about the situation, even though he shed tears, even though he cried, even though he begged and pleaded. They said that he was very polite about the situation. But through education and through paying attention to the media and what goes on in our community, it's not the first time that someone has left that hospital and has died the same day, But the only difference between this person and my brother is that this person fought a lot harder, and, he screamed and made a scene, and the result was the same. So you can be polite and you can fight and you can scream and you can raise your voice that you need this help, and you need medical help in particular, not financial, not social assistance. You need medical help because it's a medical condition. The result's the same. It's death, and people of power and authority and the Saskatchewan Health Authority are looking at these statistics every year and these record-breaking numbers, and to look at that and to not make the necessary changes in our system is to accept death. And that's what they're accepting when they look at those numbers, is they're accepting the deaths that come with substance use disorder. Why change it, And that's what's flawed about it, is that they're accepting their community losing loved ones because they're not numbers, they're people. They're someone's son, they're someone's brother, they're someone's friend, partner, mother, father, child, but they're accepting it for what it is. So that's where my advocacy came in for my brother, is to fill those gaps. So I took every gap in the system that happened to my brother, the no electronic referral, the no social detox available, and we changed those.
Mm.
I get messages now all the time of how that's making such a difference within our system and how it saved someone's life and it saved someone's loved one, and that's the change that I wanted for my brother and in honor of him and our community is to make sure that his legacy stays alive and his story stays lingering that hospital to make sure that that never happens again.
So you have seen some changes since he passed?
Yes, yes.
Good.
There's an oversight now within our hospital system from the SHA to the detox facility. And now the addiction counselor that when she starts at 8 a.m., she has to call, not electronic referral. She has to call detox and figure out how many beds are available for that day. They have to communicate through the phone, not electronic referrals anymore. So that's something that I changed and implemented, as well as the next of kin within the Privacy Act, because there's no obviously you can't call someone you can't call family because of the due to the privacy. So another thing I got implemented was a next of kin can be provided for someone, so that when they leave, the next of kin can be called. Instead,
Mm.
if they can't get a hold of this person, they can call the next of kin to say, hey, this person's requesting detox and this bed is available now. So now if they get taken straight from the hospital, straight to detox. There's no gap in between there anymore, which is one thing I wanted to definitely advocate for, is because when my brother left the hospital, he was faced with two choices. He was faced to either use or go through the withdrawal. And a lot of people don't understand is that a withdrawal is just as life threatening as an overdose. To go through a withdrawal, it's excruciating. I've seen it. I've educated myself on it, and it is something that is just as life threatening as if you were to go to use an overdose as well. So
Mm.
um, that's something I wanted to change also. But yeah, I receive messages a lot actually from people who would say, all we had to do is say your brother's name and we got admitted or we got taken to detox. And a lot of people with my connection to Pine Lodge, a lot of people will message me and say, what are my steps in this situation? Yes, I love Pine Lodge. I love my relationship with Pine Lodge. I'm the director of Pine Lodge. She's so great. So,
I'm a former client and employee myself.
yes, yeah, I
I don't
love
know if you knew
Pine
that.
Lodge.
Oh, okay.
No, I didn't, but I do
Okay.
now. That's great. I love what
Yeah.
they're doing. They're such a huge difference in our community. They're definitely something that needed to fill the gap, and they're doing that. And, the programs that they're running and the things that they're doing over at Pine Lodge are extraordinary.
So you've said quite a few interesting things. One, they told Shane that he didn't meet that criteria for detox, and I'm like, how? What criteria do you need to meet if you're not in the hospital overcoming an overdose?
Yeah, that's my question too. That's still something. A lot of people have asked me if the questions I had in the beginning for the Saskatchewan Health Authority and Minister Hindley and the Saskatchewan Party have been answered. And, a lot of questions are still lingering after coming up on 2 years now. I'm still have unanswered questions like why my brother was not medically admitted for a withdrawal if there was no beds available, why wasn't that offered to him or why wasn't that accepted when he asked for it?
I guess it was in the middle of COVID too. Like, I don't know if that's a factor.
Yeah, yeah, COVID. But I feel like even before COVID, that was always an issue, is that
You're
we don't
right.
have the funding, and we don't have the resources, and we don't have beds available for people who suffer from substance use disorder because someone with, something they consider a disease, because, we're still fighting for that to be taken seriously, that addiction is a medical disease, that's not as concerning or health concerning as someone that's coming in with a heart attack or a broken leg. They need that bed more than someone who suffers from substance use disorder. And that's a huge stigma within our system, is that, people who suffer from substance use disorder forfeit their right to equal health care. as opposed to someone who's going in there, with some other condition, such as a heart condition or a lung condition, and
Mhm.
we're throwing the illegal term on to people who suffer from substance use disorder, which is, pushing them more into being incarcerated than they are into the hospitals, and that's where the stigma plays a huge part, is that, somewhere along the way there's been a barrier with love and compassion in our system for people who suffer from substance use disorder, because they're viewing it as a belief, and it's a bias that um, it's they're doing it willingly. They're using willingly, they're using it because they want to and not because they have to, and that's where the stigma is playing a huge part into substance use disorder and the Saskatchewan Health Authority and the hospitals. And, because it's easier to put them in a jail than it is to put them into a treatment in a hospital these days. And it's always been like that. So even with COVID being on the table and, our nurses and doctors being exhausted from COVID and lack of funding and resources, it's always been that way, even with or without COVID being in the picture. It's always been an issue to get healthcare for people who suffer from substance use disorder.
100%. Yeah. And if anything, COVID made it worse, not just trying to find
Yeah,
care, but like amped up the drug use and amped up um, overdoses. And so yeah, they kind of go hand in hand.
yeah,
It's like, um, yeah, yes, the hospital was full with COVID and all this stuff, but also society is crumbling a bit more than normal because there's so much more drug use and overdoses happening right now because of COVID. So either way,
yes,
you're not providing a good enough service.
no. And
Mm.
I think we're all deserving of the same and equal health care, regardless of situation. We all should be having that opportunity to be medically admitted if that's the case, and I really push for these resources and to have them readily available for people who suffer from substance use disorder, because even these changes that have been implemented, and and there's been a lot of no's within my advocacy. No inquest on my brother, which again relates to stigma, because the only overdose to my knowledge that um, get an inquest is if they're incarcerated, if
Mm.
they're in the system. But in the incarcerated part of it, that's the only way we do inquests now in our community, and always been that way, is if it happened in jail, and it happened in incarceration and it happened in the prison system, which is faulting, because if the coroner did the inquest on my brother, it would have changed the stigma that addiction and people who suffer from substance use disorder are just criminals and deviant. Overdoses actually occur more, because you hear it all the time. Oh, another overdose in custody, overdose in custody, overdose in custody, custody, custody. Like, that's all you hear. But if you take a second and see that overdoses happen more on the streets and more in because they got pushed out of our healthcare system, that would change that community stigma that views people with substance use disorder as criminal and deviant, as, oh, okay, like, they're not all criminals, they're not all deviant, So
Hmm.
that was like really a hard note to take when we got told that we're not going to do the inquest. And the only reason why, they said that we didn't is because the advocacy that we were already doing with the Legislative Assembly, as well as making it known to the media what had happened to my brother at the Saskatchewan Health Authority's account. Um, and because um, of just the advocacy that we were doing, that was why we were told that my brother didn't meet the criteria again for something, which what other what other circumstances in our community needs to happen to have an inquest on someone who suffered an overdose in our community? He met the criteria. He got pushed out of a hospital. He wasn't taken seriously within the system. And he died in the same day, 12 hours from being discharged. My brother was no longer earthside, So that
Hmm.
was really a hard note to take. And it was really faulting for me to understand and try to wrap my head around.
So because you went to the media and started kind of talking out about it, that was one of the reasons why they wouldn't do the inquest.
Yes, because the point of an inquest is to spread public awareness.
But
And we were doing that.
so a year before that, there was a young guy that went to the hospital. Security kicked him out, and he was found dead in Wascana Lake like 2 hours later. And that was a mental health crisis as well. But they still did an inquest on his case, and that was already in the media. So it's funny because
Yes.
I like, trust me, like mental health, addictions aside, mental health also gets a bad rap in the healthcare system right now.
Yeah, they do.
But
Yep. And they go hand in hand between them.
exactly, but they did an inquest on that one, so it's like they're even doubling down on addictions even more. So they're like, well, we're not going to do an inquest on your brother though because it was
Yes.
drugs, not mental health. Even though it should be an inquest
Hmm.
on both. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's I
Yes.
like I'm so I
And
hate doing
that would
these
have changed
interviews
everything.
sometimes because I get so fucking amped up.
Yes. Me too. And this is the thing that this is like, and and we met, like we've had personal meetings with the chief coroner of Saskatchewan and Minister Hindley and attended the Saskatchewan legislative, and it all happened around the same time from that November of last year to January of this year was a lot of advocating within the system in terms of government and the Saskatchewan Health Authority. And the chief coroner as well, we met with him. And one thing I can appreciate is that he did come out with a press release to recommend uh, all the recommendations that he did to the Saskatchewan Health Authority, which they did implement, and put an oversight on it. So there's someone there readily and steadily making sure that everything that's been implemented stays implemented, and it wasn't just a 2 week thing, and then everyone went back to the norm. So I mean, he did come out and talk about my brother's story, which is the first time that that's ever happened in Saskatchewan. So that was a huge win for us as well, even without the inquest. The only part of the inquest that I really wanted, and we didn't want to put the blame on anyone specifically. We didn't want to put the blame on the addiction counselor or the doctor or the nurses. We wanted the system as a whole to be accountable, because if there's a gap or leak or chain broken within the system, it's going to fail,
Yeah,
and it's failed. So,
yeah, exactly. And I can somewhat relate because I went through my own process of I ended up detoxing in my local hospital, and then this is almost 7 years ago, and then my doctor he wanted me to go to detox and whatever, like, and it took him like 2 days of like phone calls and screwing around and to even figure
oh
out
my God.
how to deal with me and how to like, because doctors, they don't know how to navigate the mental
No,
health and
and
addiction
48
side.
hours, like, yeah, and
Yeah.
48 hours, that's a long time for someone, going through withdrawal and as someone who suffers from substance use disorder, 48 hours is a long time to be, not having these resources available within the second that you ask for them, right? So,
Well,
yeah,
my doctor's credit, well, I credit him for a lot of really great stuff, but I wasn't actually asking.
yeah,
He was just getting them for me and telling
yeah,
me to do them because I was like, you know what? I think I'm fine. You know, it's just
yeah,
marijuana and alcohol. Meanwhile I'm suicidal, right? But
yeah,
um,
of course, yeah.
so yeah, that's a huge thing that the medical system and the healthcare, or the healthcare system and the mental health care system and addiction system, like there no one knows how to talk to each other, and no one knows how the other ones operate or how to deal with these people that come in looking for help.
Yes,
So that's amazing that you've got some change there, that
thank you.
that they actually make a phone
Yeah.
call to detox. And like my doctor did the same thing eventually, like once he found out like what he had to do, but it took a while. It's not just a known thing.
Well,
It's
yeah, well, I was like, what are these electronic referrals? Like, how long does it take for someone to receive this electronic referral? And how long does it take for, the electronic referral to be answered and responded to? What's the time on that? Because, timing is everything for people who are going through a withdrawal or, wanting to use again because the pain is excruciating. So,
mhm.
yeah, I'm definitely glad that the phone call is a huge thing now within the system because I feel like even that alone changes a lot of dynamic
Yeah.
and a lot of lack of miscommunication, because there's definitely no room for miscommunication in terms of the system and, helping people with substance use disorder get into detox and rehab facilities.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about
Yeah.
some provinces are kind of turning into involuntary treatment? So they're just forcing people to go into treatment. Are you pro or against something like that?
I'm against that. I can't speak on a lot of it because I haven't really educated myself a lot on the involuntary treatment, but I just know that that's more harmful. That's one thing I can say, is that I truly believe that involuntary treatment is not tied to harm reduction. That is not going to, the one thing I could say is that um, in terms of harm reduction, having those beds available is significant, but forcing people into those beds when they're not ready to be in there is harmful.
Hmm.
I'm definitely against involuntary treatment.
Yeah.
I know
Y-
from experience watching my brother um, go into treatment based on the fact that my parents pushed him into it, or they made him go. It failed. It failed almost every time. But when I seen him actually want to do the work, and he did, he's been to Maxi House, he's been to Pine Lodge, he's been to Calder Center, he's been to Musha, Saskatoon, and when I seen him actually go into these centers willingly, he did well. He did the work, he did the journaling, he did the healing, he did the counseling. I truly believe that involuntarily forcing someone into treatment is more harmful than it would be beneficial to someone who suffers from substance use disorder.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. That being said, I know some people have gotten sober because of it, but ultimately,
Yeah.
I don't think that's the right answer. I mean, of all the things you can do to change the system, like, why would you go? Why is that your first option? You know what I mean? Like, I've talked to Everett Hinley, I don't know
Yeah.
how many times too, and I don't know how many people have talked to the government about what people on the ground actually are saying and needing, and then they just throw them, a few more treatment beds instead of actually
Yeah.
getting what the professionals, the consultants are actually saying and needing and wanting.
Yes. Yeah. And like, even just like, a lot of people think safe harm reduction is, clean drug supply, naloxone kits, but safe harm reduction is treatment beds, it's treatment centers, it's counseling, it's shelter, safe harm reduction goes far beyond just a clean drug supply, which is one thing. Yeah. I was shocked too that involuntary treatment was their first source of trying to, change the system and the dynamic within substance use disorder.
It's
When all
borderline
you're doing
jail.
is that's what I was going to say. You might as well. It's just another way to incarcerate and make money for the government, right? As opposed to like providing safe harm reduction in other ways, which is flawed. Because you're taking traumatized people and abused people who suffer from substance use disorder, and you're just repeating the cycle over and over again. It's a repetitive cycle. You're just re-traumatizing them. Is what you're
Yeah.
doing. You're just re-traumatizing them over and over again, and then they're getting more hurt and they're getting more in pain, and then you're wondering why they don't seek help. And then you
Yeah.
wonder why they're not listening and you know, taking the action to do it, is because you're forcing them, for one, and for two, there's just so much stigma that surrounds it. There's
Yeah.
no readily resources available for people. You have all these organizations and nonprofits trying to provide these resources into our community, because we're the ones in the trenches, and we're the ones out here fighting for the differences, and we're fighting to provide them the resources because we're in there and we're seeing what the gaps are, and we're seeing the resources that need to be provided, whether it's food or shelter, warmth. Our winter conditions are freezing and there's lack of shelters, so we're out here trying to provide the warmth and the clothing and the blankets. And you have the government that sits in the legislative building, and we're telling them what we need, and we're telling them where the funding should go, and we're telling them what would help and be beneficial, and change that. But they're providing involuntary treatment, which is another term for jail, and that's as good as it gets. And this
Yeah.
can't be as good as it gets. you know
Yeah. Yeah. I just did an interview with Rob Krauser, which I know you guys know each other somehow. Um, and
Yeah,
he,
we work together sometimes.
oh yeah, oh,
Just
okay,
because.
awesome. And he said it so simply. It's like, what do people want? It's validation and empathy. Like if you could treat addiction with validation and empathy instead of treating them like criminals, I mean, that would go such a far, like it would be mind blowing how many people would actually come forward and ask for help instead of not coming forward because they're scared to go into jail or being involuntarily put into treatments, which,
Yeah,
or maybe they do want treatment, but it's not that kind of treatment. Maybe because there's different ways to get clean
yeah,
and sober, and to be like locked into a building and told, do the work or you're going to jail. Like that's not helpful. That you feel like a
yeah.
criminal. Yeah. And like, who wants to feel like a criminal? Like if I broke my leg and I went to the hospital, they're like, you might go into jail because you came in with a broken leg. I wouldn't go to the hospital with a broken leg.
No, absolutely not. And they that's another thing too, is that they get these police involved in, mental health crises and, substance use disorder crises. And, even me, like someone who, doesn't suffer from substance use disorder, the last person I would want to see is a police officer, to be honest. And that's just because, it's the stigma that surrounds the justice system and the corruptionness of everything, And do you know how many times my brother's gone to jail and he'd be sober and, I'd be hugging him goodbye. He's like, he's like, the most, pardon my language, fucked up thing about this actually is that, like, I don't even remember why I'm going to jail. I don't remember what I did. I don't
Mm,
remember those moments. I don't remember, what had happened to get me here. I was too high and too fucked up, to really remember. Can you imagine going to jail for something you don't even remember doing? And I'm not trying to justify it or validate it, but why do we throw people with substance use disorder into incarceration that has no rehabilitation? It does more damage than it ever does good. And some people can go to jail for X amount of months and years and come out and be sober and remain sober, but a lot of the times too, you're sending people out of jail with nowhere to go. There's no
mm-hmm.
homes, there's no shelters, there's no resources. You go to jail and then you're out and that's it. And that's the same kind of with, our rehab system as well, is that you're going into treatment for 30 days or whatever, and then you get out and then what? Where do you
Yeah.
go from there? If you don't have a family to go home to, if you don't have a place to stay, like it's just another like recycle, and that's kind of what our system is built on is, reincarceration as opposed to rehabilitation. So, and it's because of the lack of compassion and resources and love, particularly love, because they're human, like Rob couldn't have said it better. All they want is love. All they want is compassion, to be heard, but we cut their voices off and we cut their needs off and, we cut the love and the barriers off because, we're taught that we're just a tough love and have this module where, we have to have boundaries up with people who suffer from substance use disorder because if we don't, then we're just enabling, But look where that got us. Death, counselors will always tell us to tough love, he needs to do it for himself. If he reaches out, like he knows his tools, and my brother reached out to my mom a few days before he passed away saying that he needs help, but we were taught tough love, and look where that got us. No one teaches you that tough love is death for the most part, that the result could or is death,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the fucked up part about it is that like, had we known any better and had I known what I know today and that tough love can result to death and 99% of the chance it might, I would have done things a lot differently.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that argument that we're enabling them when in fact what you're doing is perpetuating the whole thing. It's like actually you're enabling them by not giving them any kind of empathy and compassion and love. And so, but
Yeah.
you can't. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to change people's minds that are so. I don't know.
And now that I have friends or family or strangers even that are like, how do I deal with my partner or my brother or my sister or my mom? I love them so much, but I can't keep doing it. I'm like, love them the way that you can. Just love them, preach to them, don't force anyone into treatment if they don't want to go. But supply that safe harm reduction and supply that love and love them fully, which is something I do. My brother currently who's an active addiction. I go to the trap house that he stays in, and I sit with him and I hold him and I love him, and I talk to other people that are also within the household, that are there, and I apply that love to them too, and I don't even know who they are, but they deserve it. And they didn't forfeit their right to love and compassion and acceptance just because they suffer from a medical condition and a
Hmm.
disease. They deserve it just as much as anybody else is. So now
Yeah.
I've definitely, one thing that I advocate for within my own foundation with Laugh Now Cry Later is we go out into that community, and I emphasize this to my team, and we're not just supplying blankets and winter clothing and warmth, and food and hot coffees. We're giving them love as well. I said, so we're gonna I definitely emphasize on the love and compassion part, because that's what they need the most. And
Mhm.
that's something like I regret not doing a lot with my brother. And don't get me wrong, I one thing I can say is I fought like hell for my brother, and I loved him so much, So but you never, when someone passes away, you never think that you did enough, And so now I just try to apply all this love, because when my brother passed away, I didn't know what to do with all this love and all this pain. So I pivoted and I resurrected the love, and I apply it to everybody else, as much as I possibly can. So I love strangers who suffer from substance use disorder and homelessness a lot more. And I go out into, the community, and I just shine love on people while I'm giving them these resources. I don't just throw them the blanket. I wrap the blanket around them. That's something, I drink coffee with them. I hear their conversations, I listen to their stories if they're willing to share, because as much as we can provide resources, we can also provide hearts, and we can also provide this love, because that alone also makes a difference. And one thing I try to educate people on and advocate for people is put down your phones, stop making memes out of
As your
these
phone is
people.
ringing in the background.
Yes, and stop making memes out of
Mm.
people who suffer from substance use disorder. I see it all the time on Instagram. I
Me too,
see
man.
people. I'm like, man, like that's somebody,
And
and
like
I
local accounts make doing it with local people.
yes, I know. And when I first started advocating, I'd have people messaging me being like, oh, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, your brother chose to use, he chose to die, that's what they say. And I used to get so fucking mad. I would go off on these people. But now I've grown so much in the last 2 years within my foundation and in myself, and particularly now I use it as educational opportunities. I'm like, here's where you're wrong. Here's, this is the proper terminology. This is, why it's classified as a disease and not as something that people are just willingly doing. And this is why our system is flawed. So now I use it as an educational opportunity as opposed to backlashing. And I've grown a lot because I know with advocacy, there's going to be a lot of people that still are stuck in 1960s wisdom, and they're still not understanding how much the drug world has changed and how the community has changed with drug use, but our resources haven't adapted to that change.
Hmm.
And so I just really try to educate people now and use this educational opportunity as opposed to, screaming back in their face like, you motherfucker, like you're wrong, and I used to get so mad, and now I just like, it doesn't phase me as much as it used to, because now I can just educate people and I can talk about it. And how we get, to promote this change is by conversation. So,
Hmm.
I appreciate actually when people are like, well, this is he chose to use and he chose to do this. And I'm like, okay, well, here's what I'm trying to explain to you, and why, that's not true, and why that's faulting, and why that's stigmatizing, and that's not going to promote recovery. It's going to prevent it. So I really try to use my foundation and myself and my social media pages now to educate people, and to use the backlash that I get through advocating as a way to teach people. Even seeing these memes, and I'm just like, telling you, like, put down your phone. Like, if you're driving and you see someone in need, try to think of it as you're somebody, your kids, your whoever. Because at first I was doing this advocacy um, for my brother and to honor my brother, and he'll always be the foundation and the base of why I do what I do. Anyone that knows me is going to know him, and they're going to know his story, and they're going to hear me loud and clear. Because if there's one thing I've learned over the last 2 years, is that I have a very powerful voice, and I intend to continue to use that voice to promote change and to advocate for change, because I'm no longer advocating for this generation. I'm trying to advocate for your children to have these resources. So if your children grow up and they have to endure the same things, they have resources readily available for them, and their kids will, and their kids will, and their kids will. So I'm trying to hold the torch and blaze through these trails for future generations and their future generations, because it's no longer just about today and the now and the then. It's about everything that's to come as well within our system. So I'm trying, and I say these to people, to strangers all the time. And I'm like, if you have kids or grandkids, someday I hope that when I advocate and these changes, because I've already had so many implemented already, and the resources are readily available for you based on me and other people who are fighting the same fights, that your grandkids and their kids and your kids have these resources readily available for them, because
100%. Yeah.
drugs do not discriminate. They don't discriminate. They don't care what you look like. They don't care how much money you have. No money can buy you out of addiction and who it chooses to overcome. It doesn't choose races. It doesn't choose anything. And if you take a look and read the articles of the amount of people who have passed away from overdoses, you'll see the amount of difference in them, whether it's race or age or money or poor or poverty or,
Young,
working
old.
class or rich, young,
Yeah.
old. Like,
Yeah.
they go, it does. Fentanyl is particular. It's so powerful. It came to destroy. It is, it's doing just that, but I'm trying to make sure. And this is one thing I always say to every single person that comes at me and backlashes, that your kids and your grandkids and their kids and everyone else and future generations have these resources readily available for them. So hopefully we're not hitting record breaking years every single year, and hopefully we can just start decreasing these deaths,
Mm-hmm.
but most people are just stuck and they don't get it because they've never experienced it, or they just don't have the capability to want to learn it. But
Mm-hmm.
regardless, they're going to hear me. If they have time, they can take the time out of their day to come at me like my brother deserved to die and all these other people deserve to die. They're going to hear me, regardless. So,
Good. Good.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, it's so true. Like, there's generational trauma. Why not generational healing? Why not get on board for that?
Yeah.
Maybe you're fine, but like you said, maybe your grandkids and your nieces and nephews and people of future generations are could be suffering. Like, it's a very, like, what are you doing for me right now kind of society right now. And it's like, oh, I've had some junkies come and break into my garage, and so then you get this like wall of like, nope, all junkies are shit. And it's like,
Yes.
well,
Yes.
this wouldn't be happening if we changed our mindset and started helping these people.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing is that, like, our hands are the most powerful thing that we have, and our voices. So if we put down our phones and, instead of, recording these people, and we got out of our vehicles, if it's in a safe environment, obviously, like, and we helped more with our hands and we put our hands in it a little bit more and make the difference, then at least, we're not just using our phones to record people and to make fun of people and to make memes of other people. Because I gotta say, like, the part of my language, but that's so fucked up. Even before I was uneducated about the addiction crisis, I can never imagine taking my phone out and recording anyone, in while they're suffering, or recording myself, and a lot of people are like, do you just sell sweaters and stuff and fundraise for, people, or are like, what else are you doing? And I'm like, well, if you're wondering why I don't go out into the community and post myself with someone suffering on the street, handing them a blanket, that's not why I'm doing it, and I don't post stuff like that because part of me be like, the fuck would? Like, why would you take time out of your day driving in our communities that are suffering and recording?
And you do that work through your program, Laugh
I
Now,
do,
Cry
yeah.
Later?
Yeah. Laugh Now, Cry Later. I originally started it just to like do fundraisers for like Fine Lodge and the Comeback Society, to help them with their programming. But then I wanted to take it in kind of into my own hands and do more based solely on addiction, and filling the gaps of what our system needs. So I went into our community, and I started having conversations with people, around like the Salvation Army and Pepsi Park area, and really trying to figure out what was needed within that part of the system. And I like to meet people where they're at. That's one thing I've learned from community organizations, is to always meet people where they're at. Never make people meet you where you're at. So that's something I've definitely held myself, and my standard for my team is to, if people feel comfortable enough on my team to come out to the community and hand deliver these blankets and hand deliver these clothing and mitts and tubes. And last year with our clothing drive between November and January, we distributed over 600 blankets into the community, over 200 tubes and mitts into the community, coffees, waters, warm winter clothing, shoes. Even like this year, we're starting our fundraising now, for the beginning of November. So we'll be fundraising because we want to buy fishing fence, like heated fishing fence, to put into our communities to have as warming stations. And in these warming tents, our team members are going to be there. Counselors are going to be on site counseling, providing counseling, naloxone kits, beverages, food, winter clothing, winter blankets. Because the one thing that I can say that I've noticed in our winter months is that there's a lot of people that don't have mitts and toques and shoes even, it's really sad. Yeah, we're really
Awesome.
excited for this year. Yeah. It's our
Awesome.
second year into the community, and we've been welcomed with open arms from other community organizations. Most of my team is actually a lot of people who are in recovery, which is a beautiful thing, seeing them give back to the community as well, which I really appreciate hearing their stories. And I'm so close to them now. And, they also have such an insight of what our community needs. So I particularly learn a lot from them, more than they could ever learn from me. So that's one thing I appreciate.
So if people want to join or help or volunteer or be part of Laugh Now, Cry Later, where would they go to sign up for something like this?
My Instagram page. We have an Instagram page on Laugh Now Cry Later, or people personally message me on Facebook or Instagram. My personal Instagram and my Facebook and Laugh Now Cry Later are all connected, so you'll be able to connect with me basically on there. And then it's a really easy process. You message and say you want to volunteer, then you come out to our team meeting, and then you figure out what you want to do, because we have different projects and we have different responsibilities within under those projects. Wherever how much ever time you have to donate, we're not very particular. It's not very much like you have to be at every single thing, or you have to be a part of every single thing. If you don't want to be in the community like hands on, come help us at our fundraisers that we do. Distribute tickets at our fundraisers, or like come help at the fundraiser. Or if you want to do both, that's an opportunity as well. Or if you want to just come into the community with us, that's also
I have a
great.
segment on here. It's called That Some Bunny Special. It's a segment where we chat about who cooperated in your mental health journey and filled or helped fill your emotional tank. And it's brought to you by Co-op. So is there anybody you want to give a shout out to that's kind of helped you along your journey?
Oh, yes, Jenny Churchill from Mom Stop the Harm. I Oh, when like, I didn't even have to hesitate when you asked that question, because without her helping us maneuver through the advocacy, the legislative assembly, the coroners, the government policies, the Saskatchewan Health Authority, these meetings, we would not be where we are with Mom Stop the Harm. There's no way. I already know that I would never have been able to figure out how to maneuver or stand on my own 2 feet. With Jenny with Mom Stop the Harm, like she's an angel. There's no way that we would be where we are. So I definitely want to shout out to her.
And Jenny lost a child to overdose.
She did, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And she was there for me the second that, she was one of actually the first people I've told that my brother had passed away. So,
Mm.
I called a few friends that in that moment, and then I messaged her, and ever since then, she's held up mine and my family's hand through absolutely everything, and she's still currently holding it today, and I know that she always will, and she's definitely helped me in particular guide and light the torch for me because I said that I'll probably be an advocate for life, and I will always be advocating for the system, and I've taken this on more full time now.
Be sure to subscribe and to like this video. You can listen on Apple Podcast and Spotify. This is Todd Rennebaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Keep watching for more interviews with incredible people telling their stories of resilience and adversity with mental health and mental illness.